Hi, it's Pucci, and in this video I'll show you 5 cool things you can do with Arturia's plugin Delay Tape-201. I'll show you these techniques step by step and in detail, and I'll pass you some background information about the features and mechanics of Delay Tape-201 along the way. At the end of the video, you should have a fair understanding of this plugin and tape delays in general, and some good starting points for your own sonic endeavors. If you don't own Tape-201, you can download a free trial from Arturia's website. I'll put a link in the description. And many of the techniques I'm about to show you will work with other delays if they come with a somewhat similar feature set. I'll be using the delay with drum machines, samplers, and synthesizers and such. But of course, you can use it with any sound you want, and I encourage you to experiment and make it your own. Let's dive in. The first effect I want to show you I call modulated slap delay. It adds some glitchy variation and dimension to drums, and it can help make a simple or dull drum loop a bit more interesting. I start with a simple 4-to-the-floor drum loop that I made with Digitact. But of course you can use any kind of hardware, software, or even a drum loop for this. I've loaded Delay Tape-201 directly into the Digitact channel, and in all 5 parts of this video I will always start with the default patch, which comes with the factory library and is loaded automatically when you open the plugin. First I'll set the delay type to ping pong. This means the echo will be panned to the left and to the right side in alternation. Now it's time to choose a mode with the mode selector. To understand what the mode selector does, let's take a look at how this particular delay works. This plugin emulates the Roland RE201 Space Echo, which is a so-called tape delay. This type of delay records the original or dry sound onto a magnetic tape loop. This moving tape then transports the sound from the record head to the playhead, where the recorded sound is played back again. As it needs a certain amount of time to move from the record to the playhead, the repetition of the sound is played back later in time than the original or dry sound, which creates an echo. The Roland Space Echo and its digital recreations, such as this plugin, have 3 individual playheads, so they can repeat the sound up to 3 times. The mode selector now lets us choose which of the playheads or combination of playheads we want to use. I want to create a slap delay, which is a short and fast delay, so I'll choose tape head number 1. It's the nearest to the record head, so it delivers the fastest echo. Next I'll link the repeat rate. It's a stereo delay, and we can set the timing of the left and the right channel individually. They don't have to be synced, but they can. In this case I linked them, so both will have the same timing. I'll set the repeat rate. The lower part of the panel, which by the way you can open and close with this button, gives us access to some additional features like the equalizer, the LFO, and some motor settings. An LFO, or low frequency oscillator, is a signal generator that we can use to modulate or control a certain parameter. Think of it as an invisible hand that constantly wiggles a knob for you. I'm going to set the LFO destination to intensity. Intensity controls the feedback of the echo. We will look into that in more detail further down the road. Let's set the amount to around 1 o'clock. I want to activate LFO sync, so it's synchronized to the tempo of the track. I'm going to choose a rate. And you can experiment with different rates for different results. I'll set the LFO shape to square, which basically means the effect is switched on and off. I can tweak it further in various ways. If I raise the input level, it drives the signal. I can play around with the amount of the LFO or the intensity knob. And if I raise the repeat rate and the intensity, the effect morphs from a slappy delay to more of a resonating sound, almost like a Carplus strong effect. And here's a bonus tweak. Arturia's plugin comes with only one LFO, but if your DAW has separate LFOs like this one from Max for Live, you can use it to slightly modulate the rate setting. The second effect I want to show you is a Lofi Chorus, which is great to give simple and flat sounds more dimension and texture and that typical wonkiness or wobbliness you want in lo-fi hip-hop or vaporwave. It works great on all kinds of keys, pads and lead sounds. I'm gonna start with this sound from TAL Sampler, based on a sample from Yamaha DX7. It's a nice sound, but it's a bit flat and dull. Again, I have inserted Delay Tape-201 into the channel of TAL Sampler, so the signal runs directly through it. And again, I'm beginning with the default preset. I'm gonna set the mode to 11. All three playheads are active. Gonna set dry wet to 100% wet. So all we hear now is the effect signal, not the dry signal that runs into the delay. I'm gonna raise the input volume to make it a bit more audible and also to drive the signal a bit into saturation and even a bit distortion maybe. I'm setting stereo rate offset and width to around 3 o'clock. So basically we're using it as a chorus now. It adds a lot of dimension to the sound. I can even add to the chorus effect by setting the two rates to different values. Notice that I'm not linking them now. I'm using the left and the right channel of the delay independently. Now I'll carefully raise the intensity until I reach the point of almost self-oscillation. More on that later. Now I'm heading to the LFO and I'm assigning it to rate left and right. So now the LFO controls these two knobs. If I now carefully raise the amount, you can hear what it does. On a tape delay, changing the rate is achieved by changing the speed of the tape itself. So constantly changing the rate with the LFO will lead to a wobbly sound. If you want to smooth out the wobbles a bit, raise motor inertia. Can raise flutter as well to add some irregularities to the tape speed, make it even more unpredictable. Can add some noise. Of course, we can adjust the rate of the LFO. And with these few parameters, you can dial up something very subtle to something very extreme. I can add a little bit of reverb to give it even more space. Fine-tune the sound with the treble and the bass knobs. And if you have the feeling that everything's a bit too muddy, you can activate the equalizer and use the low-cut filter to filter out a bit of the low frequencies. Makes everything a bit more clean and tidy. With the dry-wet knob, you can now choose if you want a more direct signal. It's more compact and clean. And as you raise it towards wet, you get a more drastic effect. So let's make a before after. This is before and after. And just for fun, I'll add a sidechain compressor that's triggered by Digitact's kick drum. The next effect I want to show you is the classic dub delay, as it can be heard on countless records from reggae to dub techno, but with a little automation twist that makes it a bit more tameable for live use. Of course, this is not the only way to achieve this sound, as producers have developed numerous techniques over the last decades, but this is a simple way to achieve it, and it's quite useful for many music production scenarios. I'll start with a simple chord, which I make with Digitone for vanity reasons, but this effect really works great with all kinds of sounds, including vocals. This time I'll use the delay on a separate return channel instead of as an insert. This way I have more control over what exactly I send into the delay. Once again, I start with the default preset. As it's used as a return effect, I will set it to 100% wet because we get the dry signal from the Digitone channel already. I'll link the repeat rate, and now I will manually set it until it's around a 16th. I don't want to sync it though, because I don't want it to be too exact. I can now unlink them, and I can slightly change the repeat rate of one of them. Just a little bit, so we get a nice wide chorusy sound. The most important parameter for this technique is intensity. To really understand what it does, let's take another look at how a tape delay functions. As we saw earlier, this type of delay creates an echo by recording the sound onto a tape, which then carries it to a playhead that plays it back. This copy of the sound is sent to the output and mixed with the dry signal to create the effect of an echo. But we can also choose to send the signal back to the input as well. So it gets recorded and played back on the tape a second time. What we then get is an echo of an echo. And that echo of an echo is sent back to the input again, record, play back another time, we get an echo of an echo of an echo. With intensity set somewhere between 0 and 1, the signal will decrease in volume with every repetition and eventually fade out. But once we push the intensity above 1, something magical happens. The echo is now fed back into the input louder than it left the output before. The echo trail will no longer fade out, but increase in volume over time. As a real tape delay records an analog signal onto a magnetic tape, the signal becomes more saturated, overdriven, and compressed the longer it cycles in the machine, resulting in a very characteristic crunchy sound that many people love and enjoy. The only problem here is that as long as intensity is set above 1, the feedback loop will never stop, so the sound will gradually turn into an annoying, noisy mess. Eventually, you will want to lower intensity below 1 to regain control of the feedback and to let the echo tail fade out. This can be done with the automation features of your DAW, which is great for precise control in a song production, but with Arturia's plugin, we can also utilize the LFO for the same thing. So now that we understand what intensity does, let's raise it until we reach the magic zone. Then I'll dial it down just under 1. We have like 0.964, just so we get rid of the feedback that builds up in the background. And I'll head over to the LFO and assign the destination to the intensity. I'll set the rate to, let's say, 1 Hertz for now. And I'll dial the amount down to almost 0. So what this does now is it will slightly push the intensity above 1, so it goes into feedback heaven mode, but then again lower it below 1 so it calms down. it will never get stuck in a feedback loop and build up this annoying wall of noise. For a more predictable result, I can also activate sync. It's a nice way to have a dubby delay that does its thing automatically and you don't have to automate it or manually tweak the intensity knob all the time. And here are some bonus tweaks for this one as well. You can raise the input volume to make it more saturated and crunchy. You can use the bass and treble knobs to give the sound a bit more depth. A sound that moves away loses high frequencies, so if you lower the treble of the echoes, it will move backwards away from the listener, and if you raise them, it moves towards you. And we can use flutter and noise to deteriorate the sound a bit and make it a bit more lo-fi. For the next effect, I'll use the LFO to spice up a bass line with an overtone tremolo. I'll start with this simple sound from Erebus. And for this one, I'll add the delay into the channel as an insert again. Let's raise the input volume for a little distortion. Because we don't really want a delay on the bass, I'll lower the intensity so we only get one repetition. Lower the echo amount as well, to around 11 o'clock. Now manually set the repeat rate for the left and right channel. I'll separate them a bit, so we get a nice stereo effect. Head down to the EQ and activate it. I'll use the high pass filter to filter out the low frequencies. If I set the dry wet all the way to wet, we can now hear that this filters out the bass frequencies. Now I'll use the peak filter. I'll raise the gain so I can hear what it does. Make it as broad as possible by lowering the Q. Now I'll head over to the dry wet knob, set it all the way to dry. So what we get is the original signal. I'll use the LFO to automate the dry wet knob. Activate sync. Can make it more drastic by raising the input volume even more, as well as the gain of the Q. Now I'm not really going for a wobble bass line here, I am going for a more subtle effect. I want to add some rhythmically moving overtones to the more or less static sub bass. You know, James Blake style. And finally, I want to add another rhythmical element, so I'll create a noise hi-hat pattern, which also accentuates the snare with a modulated reverb. I start with a basic white noise sample that I loaded into Simpler. But again, you can use any kind of sound for this. I'm using the amplitude envelope of Simpler to shape it into something that resembles a hi-hat. And I created a little loop. I'm using Delay Tape-201 as an insert again, starting with the default preset. As a delay type, I choose ping pong, so we get the alternating left and right panned echoes. And this time I'll set the mode selector to mode 9, and down here you can see that heads 2 and 3 are active. So the earliest delay is cut out. I'll set it to 100% wet, so I can only hear the delays and not the original sound anymore. Now I'll change the repeat rate, so the left and the right rate are tied together, and I'll also sync them, which means I can now synchronize them to the tempo of the track. Let's set them to 16th. And of course, you can play around with the rates and even separate them to create other patterns. I'm turning down the width parameter a bit to reduce the width of the ping pong delay because a hi-hat wouldn't fly around all the time. I can now raise the intensity so we get more echoes. Stay below 1 though, I don't want to go into feedback territory. To make it even more like a hi-hat, I can turn down the bass, raise the treble, and I can also use the input equalizer to filter out the low frequencies with the low cut of the incoming signal. And I can use the peak filter in the middle here, raise the gain here. And if I change the frequency, I can accentuate the hi-hat. Almost has a band pass filter type of effect. Now I'll head over to the LFO and I'll assign the EQ peak cutoff, which is the frequency here, as destination. So now the LFO moves this button up and down. Lower the amount a bit. I have to listen for that sweet spot. I want a more controllable result, so I'll activate sync again, which means the LFO will be synchronized to the tempo of the track, and I can choose a rate. Now let's listen to it together with the drums. So it's almost like a hi-hat, but it's not a hi-hat. The cool thing is we still have the reverb, the spring reverb that's built into the space echo and this recreation as well. So let's see what happens if I raise that. So now the noise burst runs through the spring reverb. It sounds almost as if it's a reverb from the snare. So to sum it up, we turned this into this. Those were 5 cool things you can do with Arturia's Delay Tape-201. I hope you enjoyed the video and perhaps learned something useful for your own music production. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and see you in the next video.